Hi, everyone. Just giving everyone a couple of seconds to join the webinar and connect to the audio. But for those who have joined really early already, if you could just put a yes in the chat box if you can hear me okay. That way we can check that the audio is all working okay. Perfect, great. Thank you so much. So it seems to be going well, just seeing the numbers go up very well. As a quick introduction, those who don't know me, my name is Franziska. I'm an advisor on the MBA recruitment admissions team, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Harriet and Rachel, who are both senior degree program managers, and they'll be able to talk you through your MBA journey today. They'll give you a great overview of what you can expect during the MBA. And there will be time for questions towards the end. If you could please use the Q&A box for those questions, and then Harriet and Rachel will hopefully get through most of them towards the end of the session. I think that's all for me. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Harriet and Rachel.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Okay, so yes, I'm Harriet Nichols. I'm here with Rachel Keeney. We are the senior degree program managers responsible for the academic delivery of the MBA program here at Oxford. So in terms of this presentation today, we are going to focus on kind of an overview of the program, then looking in more detail about the makeup of the class. Then we'll move on to focus a bit more about how we're innovating. So obviously, as a very large program and being in a world-class institution like Oxford, we're always innovating and always looking to improve what we're offering. And then the why at the end. So what makes the Oxford MBA unique and some of the nice quirky things about being part of an ancient institution. So when we look at the program overview, we always refer to the program in terms of the 4 separate terms, although I will say now the long vacation isn't a term in terms of Oxford language. We have the first 3 main terms, which is Michaelmas term, Hilary term, and Trinity term. These are phrases, so Michaelmas, Hilary, and Trinity are very Oxford unique. You won't really find them anywhere else apart from the other institution that's a little bit down the road from us. So Michaelmas is September to December, so that's the first kind of portion of the program. In this part, we really focus on pre-arrival and then into the launch. So we have a 2-week launch, which is really focused on networking, kind of settling in and getting prepared, ready for the first courses. The remainder of Michaelmas term, we then focus on the core courses. So these are some of the real important subjects that you need to learn kind of first as part of the first part of your MBA journey. And we also have one of our integrative modules, which is Global Rules of the Game, that takes place in the break between terms. In Hilary term, so this is January to April, we again carry on with the core courses in the first half of the term, and then we start to personalise the course with what we call a Core Plus course. So for Core Plus, this is where students choose one of 3 options to study in the second half of the term to kind of add on to what they've learnt in the core so far. We also have our applied learning projects that start in Hilary. So we have GoTo, Global Opportunities and Threats Oxford. That project starts right at the beginning of January. Actually, right at this moment, I think today we announced the teams for this year's cohort, and they have their launch week for GoTo coming up at the beginning of January. We also start the entrepreneurship project. So that's in the latter half of Hilary term. And this is where students can work in their groups and really apply what they've learned in their course so far. Trinity term is a very personalised term in the programme, which is where you can choose electives. We're going to talk about electives in a bit, so I won't go into too much detail here, but there's lots of electives on offer, and there's also the opportunity to take electives with our other master's programmes, such as the Masters of Financial and Economics and the Masters in Law and Finance as well. In the long vacation, we then split to have several different options. So we continue with electives, but we also have what we call some of our projects. So that is a strategic consulting project where we have business clients that come and work with us to provide projects, and students work in groups for those, or we have an internship for credit option. So this is an individual internship at an organisation that, as long as it fits our criteria, we can give credit for it as part of the programme. There is an assessment, you can't just work, you have to do a written paper as well, but that's a really popular option we've found over the last few years to help again apply your learning through the programme in the actual workplace. Alongside all of this, so this is the academic content of the programme, you'll have heard, I think, earlier today from Amy and our colleague Tammy about our co-curricular activities. So Obviously, we have a lot of careers activities that take place, but we also have the alliances, we have the OBNs, we have Impact Lab, Asset Management Masterclass, kind of the list is endless. There is lots and lots of opportunities, depending on your interests, or maybe an area where you might not initially think you're interested in, but when you start, you feel like you want to get some more experience in. There's lots of opportunities with us. And as we said before, you know, we're always striving to kind of innovate the program. I've been here for 5 years now, and the MBA hasn't been the same every year. It's been different every single year, because we try and innovate, we learn, and we innovate and we change, and that's to try and keep everything moving forward. So in terms of what that looks like visually, this graphic kind of diagonally across is what we call our year planner. So this kind of identifies some of the core courses. So we have 9 core courses across the programme. As you can see, like most of these in grey are around the Michaelmas term and the beginning of Hilary term. We also have our integrative modules that are slotted in there as well. The projects take place later on, and we have 2 projects that are compulsory as part of the course, and then we have the optional summer project, which is a strategic consulting project as part of the elective summer option. But basically, as the year goes on, you personalize the program more. So in the core, you're set in your kind of teaching groups, and as the year goes on, you get to then personalize. You know, are you interested in finance? Okay, you pick finance electives, maybe go and do a finance internship. Maybe you're interested in social impact, so you go down that route. There's lots of opportunities to then personalize the program as it goes on. When we think about the class, we have a very, very diverse class. So last year's cohort, we had 310 students. This year's cohort, we have slightly more. We have, I think we're on 355 students at the moment, because we have a couple of students coming back who weren't able to complete the course last year. And we have representatives from 67 different nationalities. So we have a really, really diverse class. And we're also very, very proud of how many females we have in the cohort. So around 47%. Female to male ratio, so we're really, really proud of that, and it really does make for, you know, lots of discussions and debates in the classroom. Everyone's coming from a different area, different experience, even working in maybe the same sector but in different nations. Like, everyone's got something different to bring to the table, and it really makes for a rich learning environment. As it's obviously a very large class, we split you into smaller sections for teaching. So this year we're teaching in groups of around 45 to 50. So the class is split into 8 groups. So we have sections A to H. This has allowed for a lot more kind of in-depth discussion in the classroom. As we said about innovation, quite a few years ago, we used to split the class into 4 groups. And whilst this is quite good because you get more students in the classroom, actually, with all those voices, sometimes it's quite hard to get heard. So that's one kind of innovation we're working with at the moment, is to try and get that real perfect class size to get diversity in the classroom, but also have enough time to get voices heard and have real in-depth discussions. We also then split the sections further into what we call study teams. Study teams of around 4 to 5 students, and this is the team that you will, as it says on the tin, study with. You'll also complete some assessments with as well. So for example, in the first half of Michaelmas term, there is a presentation for those core courses, and that's done in the sections. So it's a really good way to kind of get lots of different friendships, especially quite quickly in the program. You've already got kind of like, you know, 5 students that you're paired up with in that little family to start the program with. And as we then go through the program, you get opportunities to join different teams and work with different people. And now I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to talk a bit more about innovation and kind of the Oxford MBA.
Thank you, Harriet. So as Harriet mentioned, one of the innovations that we've worked on, and a lot of this has come around from COVID and having to adapt to the new way of working, the new world we're in, is the smaller teaching group. So as she mentioned, we used to teach in almost groups of 80, which did mean that people maybe didn't have the opportunity to speak or weren't as confident in speaking. But having the smaller groups of 45 has really opened up discussions and has received really good feedback from both faculty and students. We briefly went down to groups of 20 during COVID, so we were working as flexibly as we could, and that was the groups that we could then fit in our lecture theatres, so that's what we made work. It's the constant being open to change and making sure we can do what we can to give people the best experience. So as well as that, we develop the courses constantly, so this fits in with the asynchronous material. Again, at the start of COVID, we started working more with the faculty to really make the most of the in-class experience. So we've got students reading, watching videos, doing work outside of class to make sure that the time that you spend in the lecture theatres with the faculty isn't being lectured at, but is a really in-depth class discussion and a lot more integrated and a lot more interactive than maybe they were a few years ago. And faculty have been really open to that. They've been developing really good content for the asynchronous, as well as looking at more up-to-date readings, more up-to-date cases to work with. And students have created case study competitions to write their own cases that can then be used. So we've been really impressed with that. We've also introduced something called Oxford Insights, which is a brand new, almost co-curricular course at the moment, which has been worked on for this year for the first time. And that's to really take advantage of Oxford and what the city, the university and the buildings in the area can really offer. So we've had already some sessions taking place in the Sheldonian, where students have learned about the history of the Sheldonian, the amazing painted ceiling, as well as other things that happen around Oxford, the history of Oxford business, which was introduced in launch period. And that's going to be a session, at least 1 or 2 sessions a term, that really just gets students thinking about where they are and not just focused on the business school itself, but actually the city you've chosen to have and be part of for the year. We also introduced last year or the year before, Capitalism in Debate, which is our new core course, which has been really great in opening up the faculty that are working with the students. We've got much more faculty involved. We actively use debates. So again, in launch, we took advantage of the Oxford Union, which we'll mention again in a bit, and held a debate. And it really lets you address big problems in interesting ways with different faculty. So we're really pleased with that. As Harriet mentioned, we do develop the course every year. So you'll hear feedback from previous years. We know different cohorts speak to each other, but as we said, I'm here in 7 years in January, and they do change. We've changed things from introducing the block structure you saw in that brief year overview to allow students to focus on a smaller number of courses at a time, to the actual courses, to the order that the courses run in, different electives. So we are constantly innovating, and we want to react to the feedback that we get. So it is really important to us when students are here in Oxford for them to give feedback and for us to develop the course, because although we've been here for a number of years and you guys are only here for a year, you're the ones that are doing the course, and we really want to reflect that and make sure we're offering the best opportunity we really can. So what are some of the unique things that we have in Oxford? We know you've all got offers, so we are hoping that all of you will come and join us. It's whether you accept that offer. Why should you come to Oxford over anywhere else you're looking at? So Harriet touched on GoTo, which is one of the quite unique opportunities that we have in Oxford. It was our former Dean Tufano that created GoTo, Global Opportunities Threats Oxford, which really focuses on wider world problems and how our MBA students here at Oxford want to address them. So we've addressed water scarcity, we've addressed health, we've addressed the future of work, all kinds of things, climate change, all these big problems. And they work in more of an Oxford manner, which is the tutorial system. Rather than being lectured at, it's smaller groups, 5 or 6 people again, that work with a tutor and really have the time to address and personalise these issues and come up with some good, we know you're not going to fix climate change, we don't want to put that pressure on you, but actually some of the ideas that the students come out with are really impressive, and it really gives you that opportunity. You also work closely with the Scholl Centre. The head of the Scholl Centre is Peter Droback, and he leads the GoTo experience. So it's working with the different centres that may be seen as co-curricular normally, but actually are really involved in these curricular issues, which leads us on to EP, which is our entrepreneurship project, where you can invent a new company. People do take these on, which is really impressive, and work with them, and they are their future companies. And again, you're working with the Entrepreneurship Centre really closely, normally a co-curricular centre, but they feed into this curricular course to really embed you in the school and not just the MBA as a curriculum. And we've got the electives that Harriet mentioned. Not only do we have ones that are run by the school themselves, by our amazing faculty that we have external faculty, and we have faculty from a couple of different departments in the university that feed in so that you have a wider opportunity of learning. There are a number of MBA courses we know around the world that are more specialized, that go for a finance MBA or for a social impact MBA. The idea that we have with a more general approach is that you can make your MBA what you want. If you want to have that overview of a more general approach, then that's completely possible. Likewise, if you do want to specialize in finance, then you can choose your finance electives, you can choose a finance internship, as Harriet mentioned earlier. So we're really pleased that we are able to work with people like the Blavatnik School, the Oxford Martin School and the Smith School to offer our students as wider opportunity as possible. Another of the bonuses that you get at Oxford is that you have a college affiliation. So you don't just belong to the business school, although we're very proud of you belonging to us. You also get a college when you are accepted. And that gives you a home as such in Oxford. The colleges are all very different. There are lots of them, but they allow you to have a kind of the non-teaching side of your Oxford experience. There are dinners. You get to meet other people that aren't just MBAs. There's a lot of time that you spend at the school, but to be able to go out and you can meet the undergrads, the other masters, our DPhil students from all around the university and just really get another side of Oxford in that more holistic approach. So the benefits, I touched on the Oxford Union, which is an amazing historical building in itself, but you do automatically get lifetime membership to the Union by being an Oxford University student. We run ourselves a couple of debates throughout the year. We normally have one in launch, which we mentioned, which is run for the Capitalism and Debate core course. And we normally run one in capstone, which is a bit more less formal, that has students being able to debate on it as well. We've also been really lucky in MBA students being able to be involved in the running of the union by having presidents or by having members on the committee that really help to address it. Basically, the MBA is the largest single body of students. So you do have really good voting rights when you get involved, which really helps you to bring in the speakers that you want to hear and get your voices heard. Speaking of speakers, we have an amazing Oxford Said speaker series that's run by the school, by our corporate events team, that have had wonderful people like Reid Hoffman, Paul Pullman. We have specialised speaker series, inspiring women, engaging with humanities, art. We have an amazing art curator at the school. So all of these kind of different things going on that you have access to as students, that you're invited to, as well as our Career Development Centre, who you will have either already heard from or will be hearing from, who are there specifically for the students of Said. We're one of the few departments that have a dedicated career team. So they are here for you with our specialists to really help support you. Even after you've graduated, they're always there for you as an alum as well. So in this picture, you can see one of our not graduation ceremonies, end of course ceremonies, which is our chance for the MBAs to all celebrate together when you get to the end of the course. This is in the Sheldonian Theatre. You can see the amazing ceiling up there that we mentioned briefly in our Oxford Insights session. But we just wanted to touch on some of the traditions that you get in Oxford that make it a pretty special place to be. So you've got Subfusk, which is the outfit that all of these students are wearing, that black gown with the black and white outfit. Subfusk is required at Oxford for your matriculation, which is when you're formally recognised as an Oxford University student, as well as for your end of course ceremony, your formal graduation, and for the exams that take place in person. You'll have an image, potentially, I always had an image before I joined the school, of an Oxford student on a bicycle in their Subfusk, and it's a tradition that maybe doesn't make sense in the modern world, but it's just really lovely to see and just makes you feel part of this amazing community. As I mentioned, the end of course ceremony, we run instead of a formal graduation from the school. MBA students and other students around the university graduate via their college. And because there are so many of you, you are parts of very different colleges. So you won't have the chance to celebrate your graduation together. So we, during our capstone celebration at the end of the year, throw an end of course ceremony for you, which gives you the opportunity to bring your friends and your family to all get recognised together. We give out our academic prizes then as well, and just acknowledge the fact that you've been through this amazing year together. we want to acknowledge you. It's a brilliant time. I always get very teary because I'm an emotional wreck when it comes to these things, but it's just a really lovely opportunity to all celebrate together. The next thing we've put there is the carnation buttonholes, which you may or may not have heard of, which relates back to the exams again. So you're in your sub-bus. It's a tradition in Oxford to wear a carnation to each of your in-person exams. Normally on the first one, you will wear a white carnation. For future ones, you will wear a pink carnation. And then for your last exam of the whole year, you will wear a red carnation. Oh, and I've just skipped ahead. But that carnation is to signify the effort, you're bleeding this effort into your exams to get the most out of Oxford, which might be slightly macabre, but is just a really nice, again, it reflects the effort that you're putting in and the celebration of being here for the year. The next ones, we've got May morning and we've got rowing. May morning is an amazing experience in Oxford. The choirs sing from the top of the towers. It's super early in the morning. There's bun throwing, which is an odd British tradition. But again, it's something that really bonds you to Oxford, the city, and the atmosphere that you're in, which really makes you feel like it's somewhere special to be. And rowing is an amazing tradition at Oxford and Cambridge, we acknowledge as well. But a lot of people are able to do this through their college. You might never have been in a boat before, but the colleges give you this chance to row together. And there are, of course, the Oxford-Cambridge boat race as well, which is an amazing opportunity to go and watch and cheer for our top sports people. And then we've put, because we are animal mad, basically, college pets. There are colleges that have wonderful pets. Historically, there have been tortoise races. There are cats, there are dogs, there are all kinds of exciting things. Some of them even have their own beer. There are otters, there's all kinds of amazing things. But we just pop that down because we think it's an important thing when choosing a college to make sure there's a good pet for you there, just in case, because everyone knows stroking an animal helps bring down blood pressure and is very good for any exam stress. So that's from us. Sorry, I think we powered through that quite quickly. And because we're pet mad, there's a cat. But let us know if there are any questions. We will work through, as we said, the Q&A and just address some live, maybe write some out. I will stop sharing my screen and then we will go through some questions. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. Shall I take the first few questions? So there's a few that have come in as we've been going along. From Freddie, is there anywhere we can find the exact dates for these terms? So yeah, so we can make sure we provide our colleagues in recruitment admissions with those dates. They should be out there somewhere, but we can certainly make sure that that's circulated to everybody who's joined us today. In terms of how many sections are being planned for the upcoming cohort, so at the moment we're working on the fact that we will have 8 sections again, and we found, like Rachel said, it's not, you know, some of the changes we've had to make, obviously, like everyone has had to make in the workplace, is around kind of COVID regulations and the world we live in at the moment, but we have seen a lot of benefits of working particularly in the core courses in these smaller groups. So I believe our expectation at the moment is that for the core courses there'll be 8 sections, but that's not to be said that we won't be teaching in large groups. So when it comes to electives, so for example, we're doing a kind of final planning for our Trinity term at the moment. You know, there will be electives that will have 100-odd students on, so there is definitely a variety of class sizes throughout the programme. There is a comment here about getting into preferred co-curricular. So the co-curricular offerings, so the things like the labs, like Impact Lab and Finance Lab, there is a set number of places on these. And I know that part of the work that my colleague Amy is working on is around kind of making sure that everyone gets the information about the application processes and making those decisions, because as we did to earlier, like there's so much on offer, particularly in co-curricular, you will have to make a choice. And sometimes as well, that choice may on occasion be made for you if your application is unsuccessful, particular area. But we know from, you know, students that Rachel and I have worked with in the past that, okay, maybe they didn't get into their first choice of kind of a co-curricular offering, but that opened up a door somewhere else, and then they found themselves on a, you know, a slightly different journey. So unfortunately, there's not quite a straightforward answer. Hopefully not too much of a politician's answer there. But, you know, there are set places on there, so we can't, you know, guarantee a place on there. But I know Amy is working on a lot more in terms of the pre-arrival information around those different labs and how to apply for them. Okay, so the next question on here is around academic gowns. So we actually provide this information in pre-arrival and in launch as well. We give like specific information about where they can be bought, and the colleges can also help with that as well. Firing through them here, Rachel. I will take a breath in a minute, but I'll take a
Of
couple.
course.
So we've got here, so for the final term, do we look for our own internship? So for the internship for credit, these are self-sourced internships. However, we have our wonderful careers team. As Rachel said, we're actually incredibly lucky because the school has its own careers team. We have our own IT team. We have our own AV team. We're kind of quite unique in the university. We have this huge plethora of support available for the programs that we run. And part of what the careers team can do is help source these internships. We also have different kind of initiatives at the school that also help source internships, particularly in like social impact areas. So there is a lot of help there, but also students are able just to go out and find their own internship as long as it meets our requirements.
Right, shall I jump in? There are some questions around electives, so I'm going to answer a few questions together. So there are questions about, is there a minimum amount of students for it to go ahead? Are there class size limits? And is there a race to get into the elective that you want? So we do have a minimum amount generally that we ask. What we do is put a whole list of electives together, and we've just completed this for our current cohort, and get a student interest survey going initially. And that gives us an indication of which ones are going to be very popular and which ones maybe only have a few people interested. And at that stage, we might get rid of some of the lower interest ones so that we can make sure when timetabling, we're running the popular ones in different slots so that you're able to do more than one of them, and so that we're not overrunning it and causing more clashes than we need to with the electives. The minimum number fluctuates. It depends on how many there are. Sometimes we've had electives that only have 3 people signed up, and therefore we will cancel it. Sometimes we've had electives with 12 to 15 people, and we've decided to run it because it's of a kind of special interest, and we feel that it's important for us to be able to run it anyway. So it is flexible, it is not absolute. Generally, we will say around 20 students, but it does change each year, and there are ones where we feel it's important to run even if it is less students. So that's that. In terms of class size, it's mostly on the physical space we have available for the lecture. So our lecture theatres will fit 84 to 120 students. So that tends to be our limit. We do always go out to faculty if it's been super popular and try and work with them to get more students onto the electives, either by running additional streams or by moving it into a larger lecture theatre to try and get as many students as possible. We do a lot of behind the scene work after the initial choices are in, just to try and get as many people their first choices, second choices, etc., without being disappointed. And then the final choice, is it a race to get third? No, we don't think that's fair. We don't want to kind of do first come, first serve. So we have a system called the Student Option System, or SOS, and that's what we use. You are allocated bidding points, and you are then allowed to allocate those points to your 5, because that's the normal amount in Trinity, your 5 chosen electives, and then you are given the electives based on the bidding points. There are normally a few electives that are oversubscribed, and then we refer to the bidding points to see who is successful to get on. This was decided as the fairest way. Historically, I think it must have been at least 8 years ago, because it hasn't been a case whilst I've been here. It was a first come, first serve, and then it was down to admin to try and sort out who would have got onto which programme. So we've really put the ball in your court, and it's up to you to bid the points, think about it. Each year we do have people saying, can you let us know what the cutoff was the previous year? And it really changes so much that it's so different depending on the cohort we've got and the interest and what's happening in the world as well at any given time, that it fluctuates so much that it's all down to your bidding points. You're giving all the information you need about the electives before you have to make your choices. We normally include a brief overview of what will be included in them and how they're going to be assessed, because we know some people like to know that, as well as the timetable, so you know when they will be running on days, mornings, afternoons. So we try and get as much of that out there as possible. So that's electives.
Fab. I'll take the next few. So so there's a question here about what happens between terms. So it's quite a good question because it's a very intense program. There's actually only 2 terms there's a gap between. So we have actually we're coming up to it now. So the gap between Michaelmas and Hillary. So to give you an example, actually, students on this year's cohort, they have an assessment deadline tomorrow. So they're submitting their core course assessments tomorrow. Then they'll have a break, and then they come back to class on the 10th of January. So that is kind of the main break of the program, to be honest, because then when we come to the next break, which is around Easter time, so kind of end of March, beginning of August, beginning of April, we do have a break there, which is around 3 weeks, but this is where we run our international electives, if the world allows. Our international electives where we go to places like South Africa and New York to teach there. So although there is a bit of a break there, it's not quite as free of teaching if students choose to do one of the international courses. Between Trinity and summer, there isn't a break. We go straight into this summer, so what's called a long vacation in Oxford terminology. It's not vacation, but there again, depending on what options students choose. So if students choose to do electives, that can then free up a bit of that summertime. And quite often we see students, they take 2 electives in the summer, and then they've got quite a few weeks gap then to maybe focus on kind of their job search or going and having some downtime before starting a full-time role. At the very end of the program, so this is a question around capstone, we have a week that's called Capstone Week. So this is usually around the first week in September. Capstone is the official last term time of the program, so it's a term time week. However, in reality, it's a very fun week. It's full of networking, it's full of events. We do parties, we have the end of course ceremony, we do a debate. There's opportunities for kind of family and friends to come and be involved in some of these as well. Being the biggest cohort in Oxford, there are some limitations in terms of space, because unfortunately, when they built all the ancient Oxford venues, they didn't take into consideration the MBA. But we do have it as quite a nice kind of family-friendly event, and really a huge celebration of kind of getting to the end of the program, being together, and getting the whole cohort together again. There's the next question here is about lecture recordings. So you are correct. So pre-COVID, so pre-March 2020, lecture recordings were not provided as standard, and they were only provided to students who have a specific, what we call a support plan. So this is through our disability advisory service, saying that students would be, individual students might require lecture recordings. At the moment, the university, as part of the university's response to the ongoing pandemic, we are still providing lecture recordings, but this is now being regularly reviewed, because everyone's aim is to be in the classroom. The best, the way that these live sessions are curated is that they should be live and in the classroom. It's not something that you'll learn well from then looking back, because you can't be part of the discussion. And that's why Oxford has really invested in hybrid. So one of the things we've done this year is that if students can't come to class, maybe they're self-isolating, things like that, they can still come to class virtually, so you can still be part of that live session. So that's been a key part of kind of our response for this year and last year as well. In terms of, so there's a question here, does Oxford help connect aspiring entrepreneurs with investors? So this is where our centres come in. So this is where particularly the entrepreneurship centre, so that'll be, for that person, I think it was anonymous person, you would then, reach out to the entrepreneurship centre and they can help you. They actually bring in experts, entrepreneurship experts to help in entrepreneurship project. And we have had many, I think both Rachel and I, at the time we've been here, people go on and, what they started in their entrepreneurship project is now a business. So there definitely is support there from various areas of the school.
Shall I jump in? So
yes.
There's will there be a reading list published in advance? Historically there was, and it was kind of at least 10 years ago or so. The faculty don't do that now because they're focusing on making sure that their course is up to speed and that things are ready for when you're here on course. So you'll see, and this is going to touch on the MBA portal, the pre-launch MBA portal as well. So I'm going to answer that question too. You'll see the information that we feel is important for you to have before you start the course, all on the MBA portal. This is normally ready for you around June, possibly slightly earlier. It's something we're working on. It's a new portal that we introduced for our current cohort. So we've been working really hard on that last year. And that's where we include all the information where you can find out things about the different extra areas like the Entrepreneurship Centre, the School Centre. You can find out about Creative Destructive Lab. There's an alumni relations session. And then there's lots of things from ourselves as well that tell you about the OBNs and the alliances that Amy and Tammy mentioned earlier, as well as the information that we think is important for you, like the launch timetable when that's ready, an overview of the year that we showed you earlier, different things like that. So we don't have specific reading lists because the faculty have decided that actually they want you to have the readings once you're in and you're settled at the school and you've got access to our virtual learning environment and things like that. So there isn't things like that, but there is the portal that will give you the resources, more practical resources of how to get yourself ready and set up and what you'll need when you come to Oxford. Which also touches on the question about when we can receive detailed course information as lectures are held. So the schedules come out normally the term prior to the term that you're having the schedule for. So when you have the pre-launch MBA portal, you'll get the schedule for launch, and towards the end of your time before you arrive here for launch, then you'll have the Michaelmas timetable as well. At the moment, the Hilary term timetable is going to be made available to students, and then in Hilary term we'll be advertising the Trinity term timetable, which is then available for students to make their elective choices, so they can see when everything runs. So it is run over the course of the year to make sure we've got the teaching and we've got the faculty, but we do always provide that full year plan at the start of the year, so you know what's happening roughly in each week. So it's not the day-by-day information, but it is the I'm doing this course over these 4 weeks. Exams, again, as shown, you have the assessment week, so you know when your deadlines will be or when the exam would take place. But at Oxford, there's a 5-week notice period for any in-person exams, and we have a dedicated assessment team that work on your deadlines with the faculty, and as soon as they're aware of when they will be, they advertise it again on our virtual learning environment. You can find a full calendar of the dates when they'll be expected. And in terms of how the assessment takes place, the majority now especially is online submissions, so assignments. Oxford generally have been doing open book exams and online exams rather than in person, just whilst the pandemic's happening, because we have to fit a lot of people in our limited sized exam halls. But before COVID, pre-COVID, we did have formal sit-down exams as well, where you have to wear your sub-busk and go in. So there is a mix, and the purpose of the MBA is that you do have this mix. So there's group work, there's individual assignments, there's presentations, and all of that is communicated once you've got this information and you're in your courses, then the faculty will be able to talk you through that, which does touch on how does the grading system work. So that's probably a question we can get our assessment team to report back to the admissions team for you. But there is a clear kind of structured system of what makes a distinction, what makes a pass, and then feedback on how you can do resits and various things like that. So we'll get some information to forward on to you for that, because we don't want to give you the wrong information because we're not part of the assessment team there.
There's a question here about internships. So I'm happy to. So and full-time offers. So it's not possible to use full-time work for credit in lieu of an internship. For the internship, it has to be an internship contract. We're not allowed, the rules governing the university do not allow us to accept a full-time contract to then count for credit. However, we do work with individual students if this type of situation arises. It's not very common, but there are things we can look at doing in terms of what we call front loading, which is taking a couple more electives earlier on in the program. It is a 1-year MBA, it is intense, and there is a lot to do. So that is something to really consider. You know, it's a very, very intensive program, but it's not, you know, completely out of the blue that a student wouldn't you know, potentially need to discuss with us starting a role ever so slightly early before the end of the program. So certainly that's something we ask students to come and speak to us directly about, and we can then talk them through all the kind of ins and outs for that one. There was a question here about the student consulting project. So for example, so some of the companies we worked with before, London Stock Exchange Group, we've run twice now, I think, Chelsea Football Club, Barclays, we've had some engineering companies as well. So really as well, what we try to do for especially for the student consulting group, strategic consulting projects, is to match it with the interests of the cohort. Because what we want to try and avoid is we don't want to go out and source 25 projects if the current cohort is really, you know, maybe that particular year they're not as interested in strategic consulting projects, or maybe just in a particular sector. So we try and gauge student interest. So actually quite recently we had an event with current cohort to gauge that interest. So there was a lot of interest there about agriculture or food systems, and that's kind of feedback we take back to then work with our academic lead to then source some of those projects. We also work directly with students. So if students work with companies or maybe already have kind of a relationship with a company, we can then work with them to create a student consulting project from them. So there's actually lots of exciting opportunities around there. For the question on study groups, so at the beginning of the year, we put you in your sections and your study teams. So we look at making them as diverse as possible, and we put you in your groups. As the year moves on, so for Hilary term, so the second term in the course, you get to choose a preference in terms of a track. So we have different themes within GoTo. So you might choose healthcare or finance. And then so you have a little bit of preference there about what you do, and then we again put you in teams. When we then move further on to Hilary term, the entrepreneurship project is completely self-sourced team. So there's kind of a theme, as you can see, a theme of kind of like more and more flexibility. And it's to really to make sure that especially the first few teams you're working with are diverse, it's giving you a real diverse experience. And then for entrepreneurship project, you've then had a couple of terms of networking with the cohort. You've maybe made some real key connections in terms of maybe a business idea or something or kind of like shared interests. So the entrepreneurship allows for that as well.
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions that feed in together. Someone saying, if I'm currently employed, is there a length of time you'd recommend to take out of work to prepare for the start of the course? And another person saying, how many days earlier do you suggest you arrive in Oxford before the programme kickoff? So this is kind of completely with you, but from a personal recommendation, there have been people and students in the past that have worked right up to launch and that have maybe then struggled to really engage with the portal. So I would feel that it would be good to have a couple of weeks leeway where you can make sure you've had a chance to look at the portal properly. There are some time sensitive surveys, at least, that we send out to get your information, so we can make sure we've got any kind of dietaries or various things like that about you, just to make sure we can cater for you properly. So it's good to have that level of engagement, but also to make sure you've had the chance to read through about our OBNs and to read through about our alliances, and to make sure that you've been able to put yourself forward if you wanted to be a student council member or an OBN chair, and to work through the careers information as well. So the careers team have programs that they do want you to do before you arrive. So to allow that kind of time would be really helpful. It might be worth just checking out when the portal initially comes up, we get as much information on there as we can to start with, to just give yourself a realistic expectation of how much time you think you need to put into it. And in terms of arriving, in an ideal world, when there's no quarantine or anything like that, I think people have generally arrived at least the Friday before we kick off on the Monday. We have had people that arrived the Monday morning and we start on the Monday morning. And I think maybe that's a little bit stressful in terms of having all your luggage and sorting out your house or your college accommodation, wherever you're going to be staying. So I think realistically, you do want to get here. We try and leave some time in launch, so it's not kind of 9 to 5 every single day and you're busy doing stuff, so that you have time to go out and you have time to buy some bedding, or you have time to go and sort out a phone, or you have time to go and sort out a bank account, because we know it's important to really get yourself settled as soon as you can. You'll also need to go and visit your college to make sure you've got your university card and various things, kind of practical life admin things. So it is good to arrive with enough time to feel that you are settled and really in a good headspace to then hit launch on day one on the Monday. But it is, I feel like that's a politician answer as well. It's really up to the individual and how well you think you will cope with being in the new place and kind of having the space to prepare for the programme adequately.
Yeah, and I think that's right, Rachel. I think like for some people, we've seen them kind of land on the ground on the Monday, straight in, you know, with no stress at all, just walk into the business school absolutely fine. Whereas I think for, you know, I personally, for a number of people, having those few days before to really settle in, to get to know where you're going, like be at college, because there are certain like admin processes that you have to do. You have to collect your like university card and things like that. Giving yourself that time beforehand is quite important. And the college will give you some more advice as well once you've been kind of allocated to college. They'll give some advice about kind of their inductions and kind of when they would advise, and especially around your accommodation as well, about, you know, kind of that settling in as well as kind of diving knee deep in the MBA on the first day of launch. And then there's a question here around the project. So if go to an entrepreneurship, do any of these projects involve working with firms, or are they conducted at the school level? So for entrepreneurship project, we have in the past had individuals come in as kind of experts to kind of be like a non-assessed team member on some of the projects. So there is that kind of flexibility there. In terms of working with firms, obviously the main one is really strategic consulting project, where you are a team then embedded in a firm to provide a business solution. But GoTo and Entrepreneurship Project really, especially over the last few years, have really evolved in conjunction with the centre. So the Entrepreneurship Centre has, all their experts. They work with lots of different companies, individuals, investors, all that type of experts, and they bring that into the project. Similarly for GoTo, the Skoll Centre help bring in experts around mapping system, and also we have a summit for GoTo as well, where we have guest speakers. We had Al Gore join us a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, that was a few weeks into COVID, so it had to be online. But we've had some really great speakers as well through GoTo. So there really are really important projects as part of the course. And I think we made it through.
Yeah, as I say, there are no new questions. So I think, yeah, thank you for coming to listen to us prattle on.
Yeah, I think, if there are no other questions, I think I'll jump in. We'll get a little bit of time back. Thank you so much to the two of you for giving us all this information and answering so many questions. I guess if there are any other questions that come up, do send us an email. We can always check with Rachel and Harriet for you. I hope you enjoyed today and got all the information you needed. You'll have 15 minutes extra time, but in 45 minutes, we have another event with John Gilligan from the Finance Lab. So everyone who's interested in that can join. And then afterwards, we also have another Q&A, which focuses a little bit more on admissions and visa. So do join that if you have any more questions that relate to that. And then also to close the virtual experience weekend or week, we have a speed networking event today at 4 o'clock UK time. So yeah, I hope you can join us there. Hope you got everything out of the session today. Thank you again to Harriet and Rachel, and see you in the next session. Bye.